a survey to understand.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the state and the
I think we may have some connection issues. Hello, Alfred. This is the issue with international online conferences.
Yes, they keep the connectivity at times becomes a problem. I think I've seen the screen is back. You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next slide, please. Yes, so that is just the overview of what I'm going to go through. I think we could go to slide number 3. Yes, in this context, actually, I'm looking at irrigation from the point of view of providing water for crops in the right amount so that they can grow at their various stages of growth, or preparing the ground to receive the crops for planting. In the Ministry of Water and Environment, I have a department that is tasked specifically with irrigation. It is called Water for Production. And in our case, we categorize irrigation schemes according to sizes. And we have 4 broad categories. That is a small, the micro, which is 5 hectares and below, the small scale, which is about 5 to 10 acres, the medium scale irrigation, which is 100 to 1,000 hectares, and then the large scale, which is more than 1,000 hectares. Next, please. The mandate for water production in Uganda actually is shared, and it is with the Ministry of Water and Environment, Agriculture, Energy, Mineral Development, and Trade and Industry and Cooperatives. On the side of the Ministry of Water and Environment, we provide water for agricultural development, water for energy that comes back to power some of our systems through hydropower. And we also have water for industry. And our task or our responsibility really is to do mainly the infrastructure, which is the off-farm, as we call it. When it comes to on-farm activities, it is a responsibility that we share with the Ministry of Agriculture. Next, please. Globally, water production takes care of about 80% of the amount of water abstracted. However, for the case of Uganda, we are just less than 2% of the water abstracted being used for production purposes. The sum of external and internal renewable surface water in Uganda is quite big. We actually annually have about 43.3 billion cubic meters of water per year that passes through precipitation into the rivers, the lakes. However, the rate of utilization is quite low. As of 2013, we were at a mere 0.01%. Uganda's level of irrigation also, if you compare with the rest of East African countries, is rather low. I think largely because we have quite a bit of rainfall and the need for irrigation was not felt that much. But with climate change happening now, it has become a reality that we really need to have water stored to be used for irrigation purposes. Still, we are just at about 0.2% compared to Kenya, which is 4.1, Burundi almost 3, Tanzania 3.6, and Rwanda at more than 11%. The potential, if you look at the arable land where we can practice irrigation, we actually have about 3.03 million hectares of land. But out of that, at the moment, we have just about 19,000 hectares under irrigation. Next slide, please. With effect from 2017-2018, we started implementing on a pilot basis small-scale irrigation systems. And the implementation is primarily through public-private partnership, so that we leverage on the private sector's funding. Each farmer contributes about 60% of the cost, and government provides equipment, the tech know-how, and also support for the construction, especially of the valley tanks or the valley dams. The small-scale irrigations that we have done for most of the farmers ranges from 10 to 20 hectares. Next slide, please. We have actually set up 5 regional offices in the country where we have fully fledged teams that do the small-scale irrigations in Uganda. The regional offices actually implement all the small-scale irrigation schemes. And this involves receiving applications from the farmers or the farmer groups, assessing the water resources on the sites. They do design actually the small-scale irrigation schemes. They procure the service providers. In a number of cases, they actually do the actual implementation, that is the construction of the small-scale irrigation schemes. They also do the monitoring and supervision, where we have outsourced. A major component in this is also training of farmers in various aspects of irrigation, and then linking them to the market. Next slide, please. The regional centers receive funds from the ministry, and this has progressed because of the success that we have had with the piloting. We started with just about $1.1 million given to them, each of those centers, but they have now moved to the stage where they get at least about $4.5 million to implement these small-scale irrigation schemes. The next, please. Through this approach, we have already constructed 91 small-scale irrigations, covering the total acreage of 2,135 acres, benefiting 14,421 farmers, and there are 35 others under various stages of completion. For each of those schemes, there's quite a lot of employment opportunities that is created along the value chain. Each scheme directly employs about 10 to 15 persons. This excludes the households who actually do the actual work of raising the crops in the irrigation schemes. Typically, a 10-hectare small-scale irrigation scheme can actually accommodate about 30 households growing various crops in those 10 hectares, at least 30 of them. Next. We also do support the farmers by giving them agronomists in each of the schemes. And these agronomists, we give them for a period of at least a year, so that they provide hands-on support to improve the agronomic practices, right from choosing the crops or the enterprises based on the market survey, which guarantees actually ready market for their produce. And our emphasis is primarily on high-value crops that also have a quick turnaround time. Things like carrots, green pepper, cabbages, watermelon, onions, and tomatoes. Things that have ready market irrespective of where they're being grown. Next. The graph shows the benefits of small-scale irrigation. The yellow line that below is the baseline production per acre. The line above is actually after irrigation. So you can see that really production has gone up 2 to 5 times in a number of those scales, small-scale irrigation schemes. Next, this is just some of the pictorial. Typically what we do, here we have a dam that we constructed, a valley dam, which is a source of water, but in the same dam, there's also aquaculture being practiced. Below it is actually the pump house, which is a solar pump. In all these irrigation schemes, small scale, our focus is actually on solar-driven technology. The agronomist is there working with the farmers, and below you can see the buyers coming to pick the produce right from the farm gate itself. Next, small-scale irrigation, one of the benefits is that the training the farmers get in terms of plot preparation, seedbed preparation, transplanting, etc., has resulted into farmers becoming more skilled. Post-harvest losses have gone down because they are trained in post-harvest handling. Things to do with on-farm activities, managing the activities on the farm is done at the right time. So the skills of the farmers have gone up tremendously. So they are moving away from the subsistence practice into commercial practice of agriculture. The yield and income to the households actually increase in all these schemes between 2 to 5 times. They do not need to suffer to look for buyers. Actually, buyers now come right up to the farm themselves and they buy the produce from the farmers. And our main market is mainly Kenya and Southern Sudan, where we get people coming from there and straight away buying the produce from the farmers. Next. We have moved away from reliance on rain-fed agriculture in these particular places, but also the cycle of production has increased. Previously, farmers would grow crops once or twice in a year. But with the small-scale irrigation, some of them are doing 3 times, others are doing 4 times. Given that their income has already gone up 2 to 5 times in a season, that translates into tremendous, actually, earnings for the farmers. The cost of equipment is quite high, I must admit, but when you put the farmers in a group of about 30, in some bigger schemes are up to 100, then the cost of the equipment, which is actually shared, becomes manageable. And therefore it ensures that in terms of sustainability, even if there's a breakdown or they need to replace the equipment in 5 years' time, they'll be able to do that. We actually put the farmers into cooperative or arrangements. Part of their produce, they save the money so that in future they are able to pay but will also have enough money to replace equipments and expand their farm activities. That is just a breakdown of the typical costs. The cost of production per acre is about 50 million shillings using drip, but if you use sprinkler, it is about 14 million Uganda shillings. Next. Some of the challenges still is the lack of skilled extension services. That forces us now to, instead of doing only off-farm activities, to go on-farm, and we are actually hiring agronomists to get them embedded with the farmers at least for a year. After a year, based on their income, they're actually able to maintain those agronomies. The challenge that is also there is the lack of consistent funding to expand this small-scale irrigation, because by now, if we had money based on what we are capable of doing in a year, for the last 3 years, we should be talking of more than 500 of these small scale. There's also the problem of some farmers taking long. So consistency takes time to build. So you spend quite a bit of time in the farmers training so that they appreciate what irrigation is all about. The other problem that we see with small scale irrigation is the timing of harvesting. The farmers do make most money, especially when there is the dry season. And some of them have not mastered how to schedule their production so that they take advantage of the dry season when the price of foodstuff is normally high. But with the agronomists in place, that should be a thing of the past. Our recommendation, therefore, that for both the private sector and government, there's need to actually invest in small-scale irrigation schemes. They are more effective, they are more efficient, and they touch the lives of so many people. Our target is that out of the 3 million hectares, 1.5 million should be with the small-scale irrigation. There is also need to have the delivery mechanism diversified. We need to reach more farmers. We do not have an agricultural bank, for example, which can help farmers with affordable financing. If they go and borrow right now from the commercial banks, the rate of interest is quite high. The other challenge that we see going forward is support, especially on the side of O&M. At the moment, the 30% that they save to cater for O&M and getting new equipment is okay. But for bigger schemes, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Next, that is just a graph to show you what we want to do in Uganda. The green is the completed, the red is the planned, and the blue is actually what is ongoing. The bulk scheme actually rely on surface water and underground water. With surface water, because we have quite plenty, taking the lion's share. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alfred. I think we may have lost a couple of your slides at the end there, but that was really interesting and really great to hear about the kind of, I guess, the top-down side of these kind of projects and programs. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anyone wants to raise their hand to ask anything, I think you can raise your hand using the button somewhere. I think we got Abby over at Farmhand as a question.
Hi, Mr. Alfred. Thank you for that. That was very interesting. I'm just wondering, how do you pick the farmers to receive the small-scale irrigation funding? How is the selection process and how long does it take?
I lost you a little bit. Can you repeat the question?
Of course. Yeah, so I was just asking, how does the ministry select the farmers that get the small-scale irrigation funding? And how long does that process take?
We actually work with the local leaders at the district level, and we go down to smaller levels of the parishes. And we first of all talk to various groups. Those that we feel are ready and they have shown interest, then we go into an MOU with them, and we start the process of doing the survey, help them. That is after we have received the application from them, and then we go through the process of designing. Typically, this is something that takes, where you have an organized group, it takes you about 6 months before you are ready to go into the actual work. But on average, because designing, we need about 3 or so months. It normally takes us 9 months to 12 months before we can start actual construction work.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic. I don't see any other questions or hands up. I think the only comment I'd really have is it's really interesting to see that such big programs are noticing the same issues that we had during our projects around, you know, around training, around, you know, developing local capacity. I think we have one question in chat there that popped up. See, is a question about whether it's $14 per acre for drip. Is that for horticulture? Alfred. Sorry. Yes, 14,000 pounds per acre. Alfred, there's a question in chat for you there, sorry.
Yes, the cost per acre is 50 million using drip. So the exchange rate right now is about 3,700.
Okay, I hope that answers the question.
If I can work it out quickly, let me see. Oh, where is my calculator?
Well, I suggest if the questioner, Brian, you have any further. Oh, okay. So Brian's question, Alfred, I'm sorry, I missed that. Is whether it's horticulture or tree crops.
Sorry. We normally do horticulture, not the tree crops, because we want a quick turnaround time. So we use mainly horticulture, not tree crops.
Okay, brilliant. So any further questions for Alfred, please put it in the chat, or you can engage